Have you ever thought about playing a harmless prank, only for it to backfire in a way you never saw coming? I bet you've been there, feeling like you're in control, thinking that things will go according to plan, and then, suddenly, it all falls apart. Well, that's exactly what happened to me last weekend. But what if I told you the joke wasn't even on who I thought it was? And what if that moment actually changed everything? Let's rewind a little to the dinner party at my in-laws' house. It was supposed to be a typical Saturday night, good food, family laughter, maybe a little too much wine, and definitely an opportunity for me to prove I could handle all the little barbs my mother-in-law likes to throw my way. Oh, Betty, my lovely mother-in-law. She has this way of making every interaction feel like a mini war zone, but instead of guns, we use passive-aggressive comments and, occasionally, fake smiles. She can never just let me breathe without pointing out how I'm doing something wrong, whether it's how I hold my fork or how I arrange the pillows on the couch. And then there's my husband, Tom. He's the good guy in all this, trying his best to keep the peace, but often caught between his mother and me like some innocent bystander. He loves both of us, but let's face it, he's more of a keep the peace guy than a speak up for what's right kind of man. This has been the story of our entire marriage. That night, though, I had a plan. A little joke. A harmless one. One that would, in my mind, turn the tables on Betty, if only for a few hours. You see, Betty, bless her heart, is the type of woman who likes to supervise everything, whether it's how I serve dinner or the kind of wine I pick for the table. It's not that I care about her opinion, it's more that I just wanted a little payback, something lighthearted, but something that would make her feel just a bit uneasy for once. I wanted to show her that I could have a sense of humor too, that I wasn't just some shy, quiet daughter-in-law who would take her criticisms in silence. I'd been thinking about it for days. A drink swap. Sounds harmless enough, right? The idea came to me when I saw Betty carefully pour herself a glass of her favorite red wine, all the while sneering at the cheap, non-organic bottle I'd brought. You should really learn to pick better wines, Anna. Your taste is charming, but not quite there yet. Classic Betty. So, I thought, what if I just swapped her glass with Tom's? Tom was the one who would never notice the difference. He had no particular wine preference, so he wouldn't mind the switched drink. I would fill her glass with a simple, harmless water-based concoction that looked identical to the wine, and I'd give Tom the Real glass of red wine. That way, Betty wouldn't be able to complain for the rest of the night. I knew she'd drink it and not think twice. After all, she always took the first sip with such a dramatic flair, making sure everyone noticed. Tom would be none the wiser. In my mind, it was the perfect little prank. I mean, who doesn't love a little harmless trick on their annoying family members? It was meant to be playful, light-hearted, nothing major, just a small gesture to let her know that I wasn't her perfect little doll. As we all sat down for dinner, I got to work. Tom, sitting at the head of the table, was busy talking to his dad about golf, the most boring topic known to man. Betty, on the other hand, was eyeing her glass of wine with that familiar judgmental look, as if she could see the wine's flaws from a mile away. I waited until she took a few sips, completely absorbed in her own critique of the meal. The plan was perfect. I would sneakily swap the glasses, and Betty would drink the fake wine without batting an eyelash. I approached the table, heart pounding in my chest as if I were about to pull off some grand heist. My fingers wrapped around the stem of her glass, and I took a deep breath before swapping it with Tom's. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself as I slid back into my seat. There it was done. Anna, Betty said, her sharp eyes glancing at me. I think you've got something in your teeth. She always had to find something. She wasn't the kind of person who'd let you off the hook, even if it was something small, even if it was something completely made up. I smiled, quickly looking in my napkin. No time for this, Anna. Stay calm. You've got the perfect setup. We continued eating, the clink of cutlery and glasses filling the air as the conversation carried on. I could see Betty taking occasional sips of her wine. I watched her face for any sign of confusion, anything to show that she'd caught on. But nothing happened. The minutes passed, and I grew more and more excited. She's falling for it. She has no idea. But the thing about pranks is that they don't always go according to plan. A few minutes passed, and I noticed Tom wasn't looking so hot. At first, I didn't think much of it. He had been working long hours lately, and we hadn't really had time to relax. But as his face grew more flushed and his movements more erratic, I realized something was off. I leaned forward in my seat, my heart sinking. What was going on? Tom? I asked, my voice trembling a little. Tom blinked, looked up at me, and then suddenly swayed in his chair. Whoa. What's happening? Betty shot a glance at her son, then back at me. Tom? Are you okay? Her voice had that hint of concern that only mothers could muster. But it was clear her concern was genuine. Something had gone wrong, and it wasn't just my harmless prank. At first, I thought it was just a joke. Maybe he was pretending to be drunk. But as his movements grew slower, more clumsy, and his eyes glazed over, I realized my mistake. I had swapped the drinks, but I'd swapped the wrong ones. I had given Tom the water-based concoction, and Betty was drinking the actual wine. For a moment, I froze. The prank had backfired in the most dramatic way possible. I had tried to get back at Betty, and instead, I had put my husband in a weird and potentially dangerous situation. My heart raced, and my palms grew clammy as I tried to figure out what to do next. This wasn't funny anymore. This wasn't a game. This was real. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The moment of realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Tom wasn't acting like he had just had a little too much wine. He was wobbling in his seat, his face a shade too pale, and his eyes were unfocused. In a split second, the joke I had planned to make Betty look silly now had the potential to make everything spiral out of control. My breath caught in my chest. This was bad. Really bad. Tom, are you all right? I reached out to steady him as he began to slump forward, his hands shaking slightly. Betty, sitting across from us, immediately noticed the change. Her sharp eyes zeroed in on Tom's condition, and for once, the judgmental gleam in her gaze softened. What's going on with him? She demanded, her voice suddenly losing its usual condescension. I could feel the heat rise to my face, panic setting in. My mind raced, scrambling to come up with some excuse, some explanation for why Tom was acting like this. Was he dehydrated? Was it just too much stress? No, he wasn't that stressed. Something was wrong. Anna? What's happening? Betty's voice now carried a note of concern, but not the kind that came with genuine empathy. No, this was the kind of concern that only came when she realized her son might be in trouble, and she didn't like that feeling. I don't know, I stammered. Maybe he's just overworked? We've been really busy lately. I didn't think. Overworked. Betty raised an eyebrow, as if she could smell a lie from miles away. Anna, is there something you're not telling me? Her eyes darted between me and Tom, suspicion thick in her tone. My heart raced faster. I needed to fix this, and I needed to do it fast. If Betty thought I had done something to Tom, if she found out I'd switched their drinks, well, I could only imagine the hell I'd be in for. And I would never hear the end of it. I looked at Tom again. His face was flushed, and he was starting to sway. There was no way I could let Betty or anyone else see what had happened, not when it was my fault. I had to take control of the situation before it got any worse. I think I know what happened, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. My voice came out a little too high-pitched, and I could feel Betty's suspicious gaze drilling into me. What do you mean, Anna? She wasn't buying it. Explain yourself. I swallowed hard. I think it's just the wine. I mean, we've been trying different kinds of wine lately, right? Maybe Tom's just not used to it? I don't know. It must be the alcohol mixing with his system. I was scrambling now, trying to find any reasonable explanation to cover up my mess. The last thing I wanted was to admit what I had done. But as I looked at Tom again, I realized my cover story was falling apart. Tom wasn't just slightly tipsy. He was seriously disoriented. And when he slurred his words, I knew I had no choice but to face the music. "Anna," Betty interrupted sharply, her eyes narrowing. "What did you do?" There it was. She'd figured it out. Her voice carried a sharpness I hadn't heard in years, and for a second, I felt like a child again, caught red-handed in a lie I couldn't cover up. I hesitated for a moment, guilt weighing heavily on my chest. I wanted to run, to hide, but I knew I had to own up to it. If I didn't, this would only escalate. I took a deep breath, then muttered. I switched the drinks. "I was trying to play a little joke on you, Betty. I swapped your wine with Tom's glass. I thought it would be funny, but clearly I was wrong." The words hung in the air like a lead balloon. My face burned with embarrassment. I had hoped the prank would be lighthearted, just a harmless laugh. But now it seemed like everything had gone horribly wrong. There was a long pause. Betty just stared at me, her lips tight. The silence between us was suffocating. And then, to my surprise, she didn't immediately start yelling or blaming me. Instead, she simply stood up and walked over to Tom. She placed a hand on his shoulder, looking down at him with a mix of concern and something else. Was it sympathy? "Tom," she said softly, her voice much gentler than before. "You all right, honey?" Tom blinked and tried to focus on her. I think I'm gonna pass out," he slurred. Betty turned to me, her gaze now much sharper than before. "I told you to be careful with alcohol," she said, her voice colder now, but not as hostile as I expected. "You know he doesn't handle wine well, especially not something this strong." For a moment, I thought she was going to launch into a lecture about my poor judgment, but instead, she simply turned back to Tom and gently guided him back into his seat. "It's okay," she said in a surprisingly calm voice. "You'll be fine. Just breathe, all right?" I was stunned. After all the years of passive-aggressive comments and snide remarks, Betty wasn't yelling at me. She wasn't throwing a fit. She was helping? Was this some sort of trick? Was she trying to make me feel guilty? The seconds felt like hours as I sat frozen in my seat, staring at Betty's surprisingly maternal behavior. I had expected her to be furious, livid that I had ruined her evening. But instead, she was calmly tending to Tom, checking his pulse, making sure he was breathing normally. I felt a pang of guilt. I hadn't meant for this to happen. The joke was supposed to be harmless. But now I had made my husband sick, and in the process, I had shown just how far things had gone in our relationship. I had tried to play a prank, but instead, I'd uncovered the deep cracks between me and Betty, cracks that went much deeper than I realized. "Anna," Betty finally spoke again, her voice still calm but carrying an edge. "You should probably take him upstairs. Let him rest. And maybe, next time, think twice before trying to play tricks on family." I nodded, unable to speak. I felt small, my face burning with shame. My hands trembled as I helped Tom to his feet. He was still swaying, but he was beginning to come back to his senses. As I helped Tom up the stairs to our bedroom, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what had just happened. The prank had backfired, sure, but more than that, I had made a mistake that could affect the way Betty saw me forever. And I had no idea how to fix it. I could only hope that somehow, some way, I would be able to make things right. But for now, I had to deal with the aftermath of my own careless actions. The silence between Tom and I was palpable as I helped him to bed. His face was still flushed, but at least he was able to sit up without swaying too much. I could feel his body tense under my touch, and I couldn't tell if it was from the dizziness or from the disappointment. I knew that whatever was happening right now, it wasn't just about the prank anymore. It was about trust, about the subtle layers of tension I had created between myself and Tom in the name of humor. Once I settled him into bed, I pulled the covers over him, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What had I done? The joke had gone horribly wrong, but deeper than that, I was starting to realize that I might have pushed my husband into a corner, both literally and figuratively. Tom was the kind of guy who usually took everything in stride. He was patient, supportive, and calm under pressure. But tonight, he wasn't any of those things. Tonight, he was disappointed, and I knew it was because of me. I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of everything sinking in. "Tom," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to. I wanted to have a little fun with Betty. I thought it would be harmless, but I messed up." He blinked a few times, the last traces of the fog from the drink beginning to lift. "Anna." He sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. "I'm not mad. I don't know. I just don't get it." He paused, his eyes meeting mine. "Why would you do that? To me?" I swallowed hard, feeling like I was facing the most uncomfortable moment of our relationship. Tom had always been so understanding, but this was different. This wasn't just about a harmless prank, it was about a mistake that affected him directly, and I had no good reason for it. "I thought it would be funny," I murmured. "I thought if I could just, I don't know, get back at Betty for all the little comments she makes, I could show her that I don't just take it. That I could have some fun, too." He stared at me for a moment, his eyes tired, but there was no anger in them, just confusion. "I get that you're frustrated with her, but Anna, this wasn't the way to deal with it. You've been under a lot of pressure, I can see that. But playing games like this with me, especially when it affects my health, that's not okay. I trust you, but this made me feel like I couldn't." I felt a pang in my chest. Tom's words were a punch to the gut, and the truth of it hit me like a wave. I had done something stupid. I had tried to take control of a situation I couldn't control, and in doing so, I risked everything. "I'm sorry," I repeated, my voice cracking a little. "I really am. I was just trying to make things easier. But now I see how I made everything worse." Tom didn't respond immediately. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting out a slow, deep breath. When he finally opened his eyes again, I could see the exhaustion in them, more than just from the prank, but from the years of dealing with his mom's constant undermining and my own attempts to keep everything together. "I just don't know, Anna," he said softly. "I don't know what's going on with us lately. It feels like we're slipping. First, it's your mom's comments, then it's this, and now I feel like you're playing these games with me. I don't know what to think anymore." His words struck a chord deep within me. I had tried so hard to fit in with Tom's family, to be the perfect daughter-in-law, and I had failed. And I had failed him too. In my efforts to get back at Betty, I had inadvertently hurt Tom, and that realization felt like a heavy burden I couldn't shake off. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Tom, I know I've made a lot of mistakes. I don't want to make you feel like this. You're right. I've been pushing things too hard with your mom, trying to get her to like me, trying to get her to stop criticizing me. But that's not your fault. I need to figure out how to deal with her without dragging you into it." He raised an eyebrow, his expression softening slightly. "So, what do we do now, Anna? How do we fix this?" The question hung in the air between us. What could I say? What could I possibly do to fix the damage I had caused? The truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know how to make things right with Betty, and I certainly didn't know how to fix things with Tom in the way he deserved. But I did know one thing. I couldn't let this fester. I couldn't let this mistake become the reason we didn't move forward together. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I promise I'll try to make it right. I'm going to talk to Betty. I know I've made things worse, but maybe we can start over. Maybe we can get past this. And I'll do whatever it takes to prove that I'm serious about fixing this. With you, with her, with us." Tom seemed to think it over, his gaze softening as he watched me. Slowly, he nodded. "All right. I don't want to be stuck in the middle, Anna. But I also don't want to feel like I'm losing you to some joke. If we're gonna get through this, we need to be honest with each other. And we need to set some boundaries, especially with my mom." "Agreed," I said, my voice steadier now. "No more games." I'll talk to Betty, and I'll stop trying to impress her with tricks and pranks. It's not worth it. There was a brief silence as Tom's gaze lingered on me, the weight of everything settling around us. He finally took a deep breath and smiled weakly, the exhaustion still present in his eyes, but there was something else there too, relief. "All right," he said softly. "We'll figure this out. But I need you to promise me no more pranks. Just be you. That's enough for me." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of relief wash over me. "I promise." And as I sat there next to Tom, watching him slowly relax into the pillow, I knew this was a pivotal moment for both of us. We were at a crossroads, but it was a chance to rebuild what had started to crack over time. I wasn't sure where this road would lead, but for the first time in a while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was ready to start fresh. The lesson I had learned that night wasn't one I could have anticipated, but it was clear. Sometimes, the most unexpected things, like a harmless prank gone wrong, can lead to the most important changes. The trick was knowing how to handle the fallout. And in that moment, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next, together with Tom. The days following Tom's slip-up were filled with a lot of quiet moments, a lot of reflection, and a lot of thinking about what had gone wrong. After the incident with the wine, it was clear to both of us that something had to change. The cracks in our relationship, the tension between me and Betty, and the mounting frustration of living under her constant scrutiny were all too obvious to ignore anymore. What had started as a light-hearted joke had unearthed much deeper issues I hadn't realized were there. I spent most of the next day avoiding Betty. I couldn't bear to face her, not yet. But the truth was, I knew I had to. The situation wasn't going to fix itself. And as much as I hated to admit it, I knew that if I didn't confront the elephant in the room, it would keep growing until it crushed everything. Tom was quieter than usual, too. He had retreated into himself, probably to process everything that had happened. I tried to give him space, but at the same time, I wanted to reach out to him, to make things right. I couldn't fix everything with one conversation, but I was determined to do my part. That evening, after we had eaten dinner in near silence, Tom finally broke the stillness. He set his fork down, wiped his mouth, and looked at me with that familiar, thoughtful expression. "Anna," he began slowly, "I know we've been avoiding the conversation about my mom. But I think it's time we talked about it. I don't want you to feel like you have to tiptoe around her just to keep the peace. And I definitely don't want you to think that you have to change who you are to make her happy." I swallowed hard. He was right. All this time, I'd been trying to make things easier with Betty, trying to earn her approval, but in doing so, I had started losing myself. And worse, I had dragged Tom into it. "I don't know how to deal with her," I said, my voice laced with frustration. "Every time I think I've made some progress, it feels like she pulls away again. I've tried to be nice, tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law, but she's always so judgmental. I don't know how much longer I can take it." Tom's expression softened. "I know she's tough to deal with, and I get that you're frustrated. But Anna, you have to remember something. She's not your problem." My brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he continued, "that you can't spend all your energy trying to please her. She's my mom, and I get that she's a lot to handle. But I'm not going anywhere, okay? And neither are you. We're a team, and you don't have to take on the responsibility of fixing everything with her on your own. We'll figure this out together." I felt a small sigh of relief escape me. Maybe I had been carrying too much of the weight. Maybe I was expecting too much of myself, trying to fix everything. But Tom, he was giving me the permission to let go of that need to please Betty. For the first time, I felt like I had his full support, and that meant more to me than anything. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "I really do. But I still need to talk to her. I need to clear the air with Betty. If we're ever going to get past this, we can't just ignore the problem." Tom nodded. "I agree. But take it slow. Don't try to fix everything in one conversation. And remember, I'm here for you." I smiled faintly, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "Thanks, Tom." I'll be careful. I just need to be honest with her. I have to own up to what I did. He reached over and squeezed my hand. You don't have to go through this alone. We'll get through it, okay? I squeezed his hand back. Okay, I'll do my best. The next day, I steeled myself for the conversation I had been dreading for weeks. I wasn't sure what to expect from Betty, but I knew that if I didn't confront her now, the tension would continue to build and poison everything. I arrived at Betty's house mid-afternoon, hoping it was a time when she wouldn't be in a rush or preoccupied with something else. As I rang the doorbell, my stomach twisted in knots. I had no idea how she would react to my apology, or if she would even accept it. But I had to try. When the door swung open, Betty's sharp eyes met mine immediately. Her expression was guarded, but she didn't immediately shut the door in my face, so I took that as a small win. Anna, she said, her voice cool, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you, I said, trying to steady my voice. About what happened the other night. She raised an eyebrow, but stepped aside, allowing me to enter. Come in then. But don't expect me to just let you off the hook for your little stunt. I winced at her words, but I knew I deserved it. I know. I'm not asking for that, Betty. I just want to explain myself. We sat down in her living room, the air thick with tension. I could hear the distant hum of the television, but it barely registered. My mind was too focused on what I had to say next. I know I messed up, I began, looking Betty squarely in the eye. What I did to Tom, it wasn't just a prank gone wrong. It was selfish, and I took something that wasn't mine to take. I should have been more considerate. I should have thought about how it would affect him. And I'm sorry for that. Betty didn't say anything immediately. She just stared at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. I get that I've been distant with you, I continued, and I've let my frustration with your comments and criticism get in the way of our relationship. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted things to be different, to stop feeling like I'm walking on eggshells every time I'm around you. Her eyes softened slightly, but only slightly. You've always been a bit of a wild card, Anna, she said after a beat. You try too hard. You think you need to prove something to me. But you don't. You've never had to. If you'd just be yourself. I know I've been trying to impress you. And I'm sorry for that, I interrupted, my voice firm. I've spent too much time worrying about how you see me instead of focusing on my own relationship with Tom. And I've hurt both of us in the process. Betty's expression finally relaxed, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something like understanding in her eyes. You're not perfect, Anna, she said, almost gently. Neither am I. But we don't have to be. If you can learn to stop trying to impress me all the time, I think we might actually get somewhere. The weight that had been hanging in the room for so long seemed to dissipate. I could finally breathe again. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking a little. I'm going to work on it. I promise. Betty nodded. Good. I expect you to, but you don't have to do it alone. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could breathe again without feeling the weight of Betty's judgment hanging over me. I left her house feeling lighter, more at peace with myself and with the situation. There was still a lot of work to be done, but the foundation was laid. And I finally felt like I was taking the first steps toward being the person I was meant to be, without worrying so much about the expectations of others. And the best part? I was doing it with Tom by my side. The days that followed felt strangely quiet, almost peaceful in comparison to the whirlwind of emotions I had been grappling with over the past few weeks. It wasn't that everything had magically fallen into place, but there was a palpable shift in the air, like a weight that had been lifted off my shoulders. Tom and I were still navigating through the fallout of my prank gone wrong, but things were different now. We were working together, talking more openly about the issues that had been festering for so long. For the first time in a while, I felt like we were truly communicating. After my conversation with Betty, I expected some sort of immediate reconciliation, a magical turning point where everything would be okay. But that's not how life works, is it? No, reconciliation is a slow process, especially when it comes to relationships like the one I had with Tom's mom. It wasn't going to be fixed overnight, and I knew that. But at least the door had been opened, and there was a glimmer of hope on the other side. As for Tom and me, we spent a lot of time just talking. I think we both realized that we had been bottling up a lot of feelings, especially when it came to Betty and her constant interference in our lives. Tom, usually the peacemaker, had never really confronted her about her overbearing nature, and I had been so focused on keeping the peace that I'd let things slide. Now we were finally addressing it. That weekend, we went out for a casual dinner at one of our favorite spots. The weather was crisp, the kind of autumn evening that makes you feel like everything is in its right place. As we sat down at our table, Tom took my hand and smiled at me, the kind of smile that makes you feel like everything is going to be okay, even if you're not entirely sure how. "You look better," he said, his eyes warm as he squeezed my hand. "I can tell you've been thinking things through." I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to me," he replied, raising an eyebrow. "But I'm glad to see it. You seem more settled, I guess." I gave a small nod, leaning back in my chair. "I feel more settled, I think. A lot of things have been weighing on me lately, and talking things out with you and with Betty, well, it's been good. But it's also been tough. I'm not sure what to expect from here on out." "Well, you don't have to have everything figured out right away. You've got me, and we're in this together," Tom said, his voice steady and reassuring. I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me, and I smiled at him. "I don't deserve you, Tom. Seriously, you're stuck with me, so you might as well get used to it," he teased, a playful twinkle in his eye. "But on a serious note, I'm proud of you. I know things haven't been easy, but you've been handling them better than I think either of us expected. It takes guts to be honest, especially when it means facing uncomfortable truths." I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of his words sink in. "Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate you saying that. It's been a rough road, but I'm starting to see that it's not about being perfect. It's about being real with each other, even if that means making mistakes." There was a pause between us, as if we both knew there was more to say, but neither of us quite knew how to put it into words. The past few weeks had been a roller coaster, emotional highs and lows, frustrations and breakthroughs. But in this moment, sitting across from Tom, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of trying to make everything perfect, the need to please Betty, the fear of losing Tom, these things didn't have as much power over me anymore. It wasn't that I didn't care about them, but I was starting to let go of the unhealthy pressure I had been putting on myself. Tom's voice brought me back to the present. "You know, Anna, I think we've been doing pretty well, all things considered. But there's still one thing I want to talk about. And that's you and Betty." I frowned slightly, wondering where this was going. "What about us? You don't think I've done enough damage already?" Tom chuckled, though his expression was thoughtful. "No, not that. I think you've made great strides, really. But what I'm talking about is how we handle things moving forward. I want us to set some boundaries, not just with Betty, but with everyone. I don't want us to keep putting each other in uncomfortable situations just to avoid conflict. It's not healthy." I nodded slowly, the words sinking in. "I agree. I've been so focused on avoiding Betty's judgment that I've let her have too much influence over our lives. Over my life. But I need to stop doing that. It's not just about her. It's about me and what I'm willing to tolerate." "Exactly," Tom said, leaning forward slightly, his eyes locked on mine. "And you don't have to tolerate anything that doesn't make you feel good. I don't want you to feel like you have to bend over backward for anyone, especially not for her. We're a team, remember." I felt a rush of emotion, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Tom's support had always been unwavering, but it was becoming clearer than ever just how much he believed in me and in us. I had spent so much of our relationship doubting myself, questioning my place in his life, worrying about how his family saw me. But now, with him beside me, I realized I didn't need to prove myself to anyone but him. I'm going to be honest with Betty, I said, the words coming more naturally now. I'm going to tell her that I'm not going to play her games anymore. If she wants to have a relationship with me, she's going to have to meet me halfway. And if she doesn't, then that's her choice. But I'm not going to keep pretending. Tom smiled, his expression full of pride. I'm proud of you, Anna. That's the woman I married. And I'll support you no matter what. The rest of dinner passed with light conversation, laughter, and a comfortable silence that didn't feel heavy with unspoken tension. We had turned a corner, and while there was still work to be done, I could see the path ahead of us more clearly now. The prank that had gone wrong, the drama with Betty, it had all brought us to this point, where we could finally be honest with each other and start moving forward in a healthier way. As we finished our meal and walked out of the restaurant, Tom wrapped his arm around me, pulling me close. Let's go home, he said softly, his voice filled with affection. There's a lot more ahead of us, but for tonight, let's just enjoy being together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was going to be okay. The next few days passed in a strange mix of normalcy and quiet anticipation. After the breakthrough conversation with Tom, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My interactions with Betty were still strained, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. I had drawn my boundaries, and she, though not outwardly thrilled, seemed to recognize that I was no longer the easy target for her passive-aggressive comments. Tom and I were in a good place. We had spent the weekend enjoying each other's company, with no mention of the previous drama. It felt like we were finally able to take a step back from the whirlwind of tension and just breathe. We had gone on a short hike, spent the evening watching movies, and even joked about how different life would have been if I had never tried to pull off that prank. It felt good to have that lightheartedness back. But I knew we weren't done yet. There was still more to address. I wanted to sit down with Betty in a more controlled environment and talk about everything. The last thing I wanted was to keep hiding from her, tiptoeing around the issue for the sake of convenience. But I knew that had to wait until the time felt right. And then, as if on cue, the unexpected happened. One Tuesday afternoon, just after lunch, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I looked out the window, and my stomach dropped. It was Betty. I froze for a second, wondering if I had enough time to figure out what to say or if I should just avoid the confrontation altogether. I wasn't ready for this, not today anyway. But before I could even gather my thoughts, the doorbell rang. It wasn't just a casual ring, either. It was insistent, almost demanding. I took a deep breath. No time to run and hide. This was it. I walked to the door, trying to steady my nerves, and opened it. There stood Betty, her arms crossed, wearing her usual disapproving frown. But this time, there was something different about her. Something more vulnerable. She wasn't wearing her usual mask of superiority. Instead, she looked almost uncertain. "Anna," she said, her voice tight, "can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment, the tension in my chest rising. Sure," I said finally, stepping aside to let her in. "What's going on?" She didn't waste time with pleasantries, as was typical of Betty. She walked into the living room and took a seat without waiting for an invitation. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft, "about what you said the other day, about how I've treated you and how we've been. I've never been easy on you, and I know that. But I've been thinking, maybe I've been too harsh." I blinked in surprise. Was this real? Was Betty actually acknowledging her behavior? "I don't want to fight with you, Anna," she continued, her eyes briefly avoiding mine. "I don't want things to be this way between us anymore." I stood there for a moment, trying to process her words. This wasn't the Betty I was used to. She wasn't hurling insults or playing games. She looked genuine, or at least, I wanted to believe that she was. "Betty," I began slowly, still unsure of what to say. "I don't know what to make of this. For a long time, I've been trying to please you, trying to get you to accept me. And it hasn't been easy." She nodded, her lips pressed together as if she were gathering the courage to continue. I know I've made you feel small, and I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not proud of how I've acted, and I think I've been trying to protect my son in all the wrong ways. I never should have put you in the middle of it. I felt a strange mix of relief and confusion wash over me. It wasn't an apology in the traditional sense, but it was as close to one as I'd ever gotten from her. It felt like a shift had happened, and that was enough for me to cautiously hope that things might actually improve between us. I appreciate you saying that, Betty, I replied carefully. I know it's been difficult, and I've been just as guilty of holding onto grudges and frustrations. But if we're going to move forward, we need to do it together. I'm not perfect, and I'm sure you're not either. But I want us to try. She gave me a small, tentative smile, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was talking to the woman who was Tom's mother, not some adversary, not the judge who was constantly looking for faults. I'm willing to try, Anna, she said quietly. I don't want to lose the connection with my son, and I think you're a big part of that. So, if you're willing to give me another chance, I'll do my best to meet you halfway. For a moment, the room was quiet. It was an awkward silence, but also a hopeful one. I couldn't tell what Betty was truly thinking, whether she was just saying what she thought I wanted to hear or if she genuinely wanted things to change. But one thing was clear, she was trying. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe we could both meet in the middle. I'm willing to try too, I said, my voice steady but with a sense of resolve. It's going to take time, but I'm willing to make the effort. And I hope you will too. She nodded, standing up as if to signal that the conversation was coming to a close. I think we've said everything that needs to be said for now. I'll let you get back to your day. I walked her to the door, feeling a strange mix of emotions. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and I didn't expect everything to magically fix itself. But it felt like a beginning. A fragile one, but a beginning nonetheless. We didn't have to love each other, but maybe, just maybe, we could respect each other. As Betty left and the door clicked shut behind her, I stood there for a few moments, letting everything sink in. Had this really just happened? Had Betty actually come here to make amends? It was hard to believe, but in my heart, I knew that things were shifting. I took a deep breath and dialed Tom's number. I had to tell him what had just happened. Hey, it's me, I said as soon as he picked up, trying to keep my voice steady. You won't believe it, but your mom just left here. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Tom's voice came through, sounding both concerned and curious. What happened? She apologized, I said, still in shock at the words coming out of my mouth. Not in the way I expected, but she said she didn't want to fight anymore. She admitted that she'd been too harsh on me, and she wants to try to get along. There was a long pause before Tom responded. Wow, I don't know what to say. But I'm proud of you for handling it. This could be the start of something different. I think it is, I replied, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I really think it is. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel hopeful about the future. Maybe, just maybe, this family could finally find a way to coexist without all the drama. And for the first time, I wasn't carrying all the weight on my shoulders alone. Tom and I were in this together. And that made all the difference. The days following Betty's unexpected visit were both surreal and refreshing. I had never imagined that she would show up at my door, let alone admit her faults. But there we were, two women who had been at odds for so long, now sharing a fragile truce. It was strange, in a good way, but I wasn't naive enough to believe everything would magically change overnight. It would take time, and we would need to be patient with each other. Tom and I spent the following days discussing the conversation with Betty. He was as shocked as I had been. He knew his mom had her issues, but he also knew how stubborn she could be. So, to hear that she had actually admitted her mistakes, even in a small way, was a breakthrough. But it also raised the question, where did we go from here? What did it mean for our relationship with Betty moving forward? I just don't want to rush into anything. I said to Tom one evening as we sat on the couch, sipping tea and talking. I'm glad Betty came by and acknowledged things, but I think we need to take a step back and let this play out. We can't just expect everything to change because of one conversation. Tom nodded, his gaze thoughtful. I agree. It's going to be a slow process. But at least it feels like we've started something. I think she realized that you're not going anywhere, and she can't just keep pushing you away. I chuckled, a little more at ease now. Yeah, maybe. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let my guard down completely just yet. I think I've been burned too many times. I get that, Tom said, squeezing my hand. And I'll be here for you. Whatever happens with my mom, we'll handle it together. We've been through so much, Anna, but I feel like we're stronger for it. His words were comforting, and for the first time in a while I allowed myself to believe that we were on the right path. But I also knew that there would be more challenges ahead. There always were when it came to family dynamics. The next week, Tom suggested we take a break from the drama and go on a weekend trip. Just the two of us, he said with a grin. We could use some time away from everything. I liked the sound of that. A getaway would be a perfect way to hit the reset button, to reconnect with each other without the constant pressure of dealing with family drama. We chose a cozy cabin in the mountains, far enough away from the city to feel isolated, but close enough that it wouldn't be a hassle to get to. The drive up was scenic, with the crisp autumn air filling the car and the trees just beginning to change color. It felt like the perfect escape. As we arrived at the cabin, the peace of the place hit me immediately. The quiet was almost surreal. There were no phone calls from Betty, no family drama, no expectations from anyone. Just the two of us alone in this beautiful little retreat. Tom carried our bags inside and set them down. What do you think? Does it feel good to be away? I took a deep breath, looking around the cabin. The stone fireplace, the warm wood accents, the big windows showing the mountains in the distance, everything about it was perfect. I think we needed this, I said, my voice filled with relief. It's so peaceful here. Tom smiled, his eyes lighting up with affection. I'm glad you think so. We can just relax, take long walks, and forget about the rest of the world for a couple of days. We spent the evening cooking dinner together, laughing as we tried to make a simple pasta dish without burning the kitchen down. It was one of those rare, easy moments when the world outside didn't matter and all that mattered was each other. After dinner, we curled up in front of the fire, sipping wine and talking about nothing in particular. The evening felt effortless, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel weighed down by anything. Tell me something, Tom said, looking at me with curiosity. What do you think the future holds for us? For our family? I took a deep breath, thinking carefully. I think we've been through a lot already, and there's still a lot more to face. But honestly, I feel like we're learning how to deal with things, how to communicate better. I want to be open with you, and I want us to keep growing together no matter what happens. Tom nodded slowly, his eyes filled with sincerity. I'm with you, Anna. I think we've learned how to handle the tough stuff. And the way you've handled everything with Betty, it's made me respect you even more. You've stood your ground, but you've also been willing to work things out. That's not easy. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me at his words. I'm learning, I said softly. It's not easy, but I think I'm finally figuring out what matters most. And that's you, Tom. You and our future together. He reached out, pulling me into a hug, and for a moment, I let myself just be. Let myself be in the moment, without thinking about what was next or worrying about anything else. The next morning, we woke up early to catch the sunrise. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and orange, and the mountain air was crisp and fresh. We sat outside, wrapped in blankets, sipping coffee and watching the world wake up around us. It's perfect here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I leaned into Tom. He kissed the top of my head. I'm glad we're here. We deserve this. We spent the rest of the day exploring the area, taking long walks in the woods, and even stopping at a small cafe for lunch. It was simple, but it was everything we needed. We were able to recharge, to focus on each other, and to be reminded of what was important in life, our relationship, our bond, and the future we were building together. But as the weekend came to a close and we packed our bags to head back home, a thought lingered in my mind. Betty was still out there, and despite our progress, I knew that things between us were far from perfect. The calm was temporary, and sooner or later, we would have to face the challenges that lay ahead. I wasn't sure what the future held with Betty, but I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to face it. Whatever came next, I had Tom by my side, and that gave me the strength to keep moving forward. And maybe, just maybe, the weekend away had reminded me of something else, that sometimes, stepping away from the chaos is the only way to find the clarity you need to move ahead. Returning home from our weekend getaway felt like a slow return to reality. The serenity of the cabin, the crisp mountain air, and the simplicity of our days spent walking through the woods were still fresh in my mind, but now I had to step back into the world where unfinished business, unresolved tensions, and family drama awaited. It wasn't a pleasant thought, but it was the truth. Tom and I had spoken on the drive home about how we wanted to approach things with Betty. We were both cautious, aware that one moment of vulnerability could easily turn into another battle. But we also knew that things couldn't stay in limbo forever. There was only so long we could ride the wave of this fragile truce without eventually addressing the underlying issues. When we arrived back at our house, the first thing I noticed was the voicemail light flashing on our phone. My heart skipped a beat. I knew it wasn't Tom's work, and I had a feeling it wasn't a friendly check-in from a friend. I could already guess who it was. I clicked the button, bracing myself for whatever message came through. "Anna, it's Betty." Her voice came through, sharp and somewhat cold, though there was an underlying tension that I couldn't quite place. "I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me back when you can." I stared at the phone for a moment, my thoughts racing. This didn't sound like the same woman who had come to our cabin, who had almost apologized. No, this voice was back to its old, demanding tone. What had changed in the days since our conversation? Did she regret even starting this process of trying to make peace? "I'm not going to call her right now," I said, as Tom entered the living room, hearing my voice still caught in the voicemail. "She's probably just trying to keep pushing things. I can't do it today. I need time." Tom looked at me, his face a mixture of concern and understanding. "I think we should call her back. Maybe it's something serious, something that could actually help. You don't want to leave things unfinished, do you?" "I don't know, Tom," I said, shaking my head. "Last time we spoke, she sounded sincere, but I'm not ready to get caught up in whatever this is again. It feels like she's just pushing us back into the cycle." He sat down next to me, gently placing a hand on mine. "I get it. But maybe we've made progress. Maybe we just need to hear her out. If it feels off, we can walk away, but at least we won't have that 'what if' hanging over us." I sighed, feeling the weight of his words. "Okay, you're right. I'll call her." Tom smiled reassuringly. "Just take it slow, Anna. No rush. You're not obligated to do anything you don't want to." With a deep breath, I dialed Betty's number. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Anna," she said, her tone slightly softer than in the voicemail, but still a bit guarded. "I'm glad you called back." "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You said it was important. What's going on?" There was a slight pause, as if she was gathering her thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot since we last spoke. And I realized that I've been holding on to a lot of things I never should have held against you. I've acted like a fool, Anna." My heart skipped. This was the Betty I had seen during our last conversation, the one I hadn't expected. "Okay, what do you mean?" "I don't want to jump to conclusions, but are you saying you want to talk about what happened between us?" "Yes, exactly. I don't want us to keep tiptoeing around this thing," she said, her voice now tinged with frustration. "I want to make it right with you. And honestly, I think I've been holding on to my own issues with Tom and my own insecurities. I've taken it all out on you." I couldn't believe my ears. For a second, I wondered if this was some kind of trap. Betty never just admitted to being wrong. She always had an excuse, a justification. I was tempted to remain guarded, to tell her that I wasn't buying it. But something in her voice made me pause. Maybe, just maybe, she really did mean it this time. That's really big of you to admit, I said slowly, my mind racing. I appreciate you being honest. But we both know that actions speak louder than words. I can't just forget everything that's happened between us. I understand, Betty responded, her voice steady. And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I need you to know that I'm trying, Anna. For Tom's sake. For yours, too. I want us to have some kind of relationship beyond just tolerating each other. I was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. A part of me wanted to scream at her, to let her know how much damage her behavior had caused, but another part of me understood that if I was going to make this work, I had to meet her halfway. It wouldn't be easy, but maybe it was worth trying. Okay, I said finally, my voice calmer now. I'm willing to try, but it's going to take time. You can't just expect everything to be perfect overnight. Of course, Betty replied, sounding relieved. I'm not expecting that. I just want to make things right, starting with being honest with you. I'm not going to pretend anymore. This isn't just about Tom and me. It's about the two of us. I didn't know what to say next, so I just stayed silent for a beat, letting her words sink in. What did it all mean? Was she being sincere, or was this some kind of emotional manipulation? Part of me was still wary, still unsure. But another part of me saw this as a small window of opportunity, a chance to begin rebuilding the fractured relationship, one step at a time. I guess we'll see where this goes, I said, my voice steady but cautious. Yes, exactly, Betty said with a small sigh. Thank you for being willing to listen. I know it's not easy, but I promise, I'll do my best. Okay, I replied. I'll talk to you soon, Betty. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mixture of relief and unease. There was still so much left unsaid between us, so much left to repair. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were on the same page. Maybe not in every way, but at least in this, there was a small opening, a chance for something better. Tom walked into the room just as I set the phone down, his eyes immediately searching mine. How did it go? I looked at him, unsure of what to say. She wants to try. She says she's been holding on to her own issues, but she's ready to work on things. I don't know. I'm not sure if I should be hopeful or cautious. Tom gave me a gentle smile. I think you should be both. Hopeful that she's trying, but cautious enough to protect yourself. We'll take this one step at a time. But I'm proud of you for being willing to talk to her again. Thanks, I said, my voice quieter now. It's not going to be easy, Tom. But maybe, just maybe, it's a step in the right direction. He nodded. It is. We've made it through harder things. We'll make it through this too. I leaned back on the couch, closing my eyes for a moment. The road ahead was uncertain. I didn't know what Betty's true intentions were, and I didn't know how long this fragile truce would last. But for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could finally be different. The days following my conversation with Betty felt like I was standing on the edge of something, unsure whether to step forward or pull back. The tension had been lifted, but only by a thin thread, and I was still wary of what might come next. Betty's offer to make amends was unexpected, but it had come with its own set of complexities. What would it look like for us to actually try again? Could we rebuild something after all the damage she had done? The first week after our call was quiet, almost too quiet. Betty didn't reach out again, and neither did I. We were both in a kind of holding pattern, each wondering if the other was waiting for the other to make the next move. The only signs of progress were subtle. Tom didn't mention his mother as much, and I had started to relax a little more in my daily routines. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was constantly anticipating a conflict. But the silence didn't last long. One Wednesday evening, as Tom and I were preparing dinner together, the phone rang. My heart skipped. I had been expecting Betty to call eventually, but I hadn't thought it would come this soon. I hesitated before picking up. "Hello," I said, my voice steady but tight. "Anna." Betty's voice came through, sounding oddly distant, almost hesitant. "I know it's been a little while, but I thought we should talk. In person." My stomach churned. "In person?" I echoed, trying to process what she was asking. "Are you sure that's a good idea right now?" "I understand your hesitation, but I think it would be better. I want to show you that I'm serious about this, Anna. About fixing things. I'd like to come over if that's all right with you." I glanced at Tom, who had heard the conversation and raised an eyebrow. He looked just as unsure as I felt. But I knew I couldn't avoid this forever. If Betty was willing to meet face to face, it was a sign that maybe she was truly ready to move forward. Or maybe she was testing the waters to see how far she could push. "All right," I said, taking a deep breath. "You can come by tomorrow afternoon. But I'm not making any promises, Betty. This isn't just going to fix everything." "I understand," she replied. "I'll be there at 2 p.m. As I hung up the phone, a sense of unease settled in my stomach. I wasn't sure what to expect from this meeting. Would Betty really show up with a genuine desire to heal our relationship, or would she be bringing more of the same old manipulative tactics that had poisoned our past? I couldn't predict, but I also knew that I had to be ready for whatever came next. "Are you okay with this?" Tom asked, sensing my tension. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm trying not to expect anything, but it's hard. It's like walking into the unknown." Tom took my hands in his, looking at me with reassuring eyes. "We've been through a lot, Anna. I know this is hard, but we'll face it together. Just remember, you don't have to accept anything you're not comfortable with." "I know," I said, feeling a sense of gratitude toward him. "It's just, I don't know if I can trust her again. She's hurt me too much. We'll take it slow. One step at a time. We don't have to fix everything in one conversation." I nodded, appreciating his patience. We spent the rest of the evening in silence, both of us lost in our thoughts. I couldn't shake the anxiety building in my chest, but I also knew I had to face this sooner or later. If I avoided it, it would only hang over me like a dark cloud. The next day, as 2 p.m. approached, I found myself pacing around the living room, anxiously glancing at the clock. I didn't know what I was expecting, whether Betty would show up with a basket of flowers and a genuine apology, or whether she would try to turn everything into a power play. Either way, I had to be ready. Tom, sensing my nerves, came over and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I'm right here, okay? If this feels like it's too much, we'll handle it. Don't feel like you have to take on everything by yourself." I gave him a tight smile. "Thanks. I'm just not sure what to expect. It's been a long time coming." The doorbell rang just as I was about to sit down. My heart leaped into my throat. I walked slowly toward the door, Tom right behind me. I opened it, and there she was, Betty, standing on the doorstep, looking as composed as ever, but with a slight air of uncertainty in her expression. "Hi, Anna," she said, her voice tentative but not as cold as it had been in the past. "Can we talk?" I nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "Sure, come in." Tom and I led her into the living room, where we all sat down on the couch. The silence between us was palpable. Betty didn't immediately speak, and I didn't know how to break the tension. Finally, she cleared her throat. "I know I've hurt you, Anna. And I know I've said things that I can never take back. But I want you to understand that I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here because I want to try. I want to fix things." Her words felt raw, and for a moment, I almost believed her. But I had to remind myself that I couldn't rush into this. Words were one thing, but actions were something else entirely. "Why now?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. "Why, after everything, are you suddenly so eager to make things right?" Betty sighed, her gaze falling to her hands. "I've spent too many years trying to control things, trying to make everyone bend to my will. But I've realized that it's not about control. It's about love. And I've lost sight of that with you. I glanced at Tom, whose expression mirrored my own skepticism. It was hard to believe that someone could change overnight, especially after all the hurt and manipulation. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, Betty continued, her voice softening. But I want to try. For you, for Tom, and for myself. I've been so focused on being right that I forgot about what really matters. I want to make amends. The sincerity in her voice was undeniable, but there was still something in the back of my mind that told me to be cautious. This might be the start of something better, but it could also just be another phase of her attempts to manipulate and control. I don't know, I said, my voice quieter now. I need time. This isn't something that can be fixed in a single conversation, Betty. Betty nodded, her face reflecting understanding. I know, Anna. I know. But I'm asking for that time. I'm asking you to let me try. There was a long pause as we all sat there, absorbing her words. Tom's hand found mine, and I squeezed it, grateful for his presence and support. We'll take this one day at a time, Tom said finally, looking at Betty. But no more games, Betty. No more manipulation. If we're going to move forward, we have to be honest with each other. Betty met his gaze and nodded solemnly. I agree. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. And so we began. One small step at a time, into the unknown. And as uncertain as it all felt, I had to admit, there was a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we were on the path to healing. The following days were like walking on thin ice. Betty had agreed to meet with us again, and while she had shown a certain level of vulnerability and sincerity, the weight of everything that had happened hung over me like a storm cloud. I wanted to believe that her words were genuine, but years of conflict, manipulation, and betrayal didn't just disappear overnight. Every time I saw her, I was reminded of the games she played with Tom and me, the hurtful things she'd said, and the times I felt like I was fighting a losing battle just to get her to understand. Tom was doing his best to stay neutral, but I could see the flicker of concern in his eyes whenever he mentioned his mother. He didn't want to put me in an uncomfortable position, but he also didn't want to lose his relationship with her. He was caught in the middle, as usual. And I couldn't blame him for wanting to make peace, but that didn't mean I had to let go of my own feelings of betrayal. It had been a week since Betty's last visit, and I had been dreading the next time she would call or show up. But as usual, she found a way to push her way back into our lives, this time with a subtle message that felt both like a test and an invitation. I was sitting in the kitchen one afternoon when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my heart sink, Betty. I stared at it for a moment, feeling the pressure build in my chest. Every time she called or reached out, I could feel myself slipping between wanting to give her another chance and wanting to protect myself from the inevitable disappointment. But this time, I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to face the reality that she wasn't going anywhere. Hello, I answered, my voice softer than I meant it to be. Anna, Betty said, her voice unusually calm, almost too calm. I know it's been a while since we last spoke, and I'm sure you've been busy. But I was hoping we could meet again soon. There's something I need to tell you. Something important. I could hear the weight in her words, a subtle undercurrent of urgency. I frowned, gripping the phone tighter. What is it, Betty? She paused, as if considering whether to tell me over the phone or wait until we met in person. Finally, she spoke again. I think it's something we should discuss face to face, Anna. It's about Tom, and about how things have been between us. My stomach twisted. Was she implying something about our relationship? Something I hadn't noticed? Or worse, something she had been hiding for all this time? I couldn't shake the suspicion that she was about to drop another bombshell, just like she had done so many times before. I don't know, Betty, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't think I'm ready for another round of this. You've already said so much, and I'm still trying to process it all. I understand, Betty replied quickly, her voice taking on a softer tone. But this is different. I need you to hear me out, Anna. It's important. Can we just talk? Please? Her plea was laced with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't just about making amends anymore. It felt like there was something much more pressing she needed to get off her chest. I swallowed hard, my resolve wavering. Fine, we can meet. But I'm not promising anything. I still don't know if I can trust you again, Betty. I understand, she said again. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. at the cafe down the street? I'll be there. All right, I said, feeling the tension start to build again. I'll see you then. After I hung up, I sat in silence, trying to calm my nerves. Tom came into the room a few minutes later, looking at me with concern written all over his face. Who was that? It was Betty, I said, my voice shaking slightly. She wants to meet tomorrow. Tom's face softened, but I could see the flicker of worry in his eyes. What's this about? What does she want now? I shook my head, my mind still racing. I don't know. She said it was something important, but I don't trust her. She's been so unpredictable lately, and I'm afraid she's about to hit us with something we're not prepared for. Tom nodded, his expression growing serious. Anna, you don't have to go if you're not ready. I don't want you to put yourself in a position where you feel like you're being manipulated again. I know, I said softly, looking at him. But I don't know how much longer I can keep avoiding it. I'm not going to keep pretending that everything's fine when it's not. And we need to know what she's really after. Tom took a deep breath and pulled me into a hug. Just be careful. We'll handle whatever comes our way, but I need you to take care of yourself too. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of his embrace. He was my anchor, the one person who had always supported me through everything. And in that moment, I realized that no matter what Betty said, no matter how much she tried to twist things, I had Tom's unwavering support. The next afternoon, I found myself sitting at the cafe, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. The table was small and intimate, but the air between us felt anything but relaxed. Betty arrived a few minutes late, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she walked toward me. She looked composed as usual, her expression unreadable, but there was a certain stiffness to her movements that I couldn't ignore. Anna, she greeted, her tone polite, though there was an underlying tension. Thank you for meeting me. I nodded, my eyes narrowing slightly. You said it was important. What's going on? Betty sat down across from me, glancing around the cafe before meeting my gaze. I've been thinking a lot about the way things have gone between us. And I realize that there are things I've kept from you, things that have been affecting everything. Not just between us, but between me and Tom too. My heart skipped. What are you talking about? Betty took a deep breath, her eyes darting to the side for a moment before she locked eyes with me again. I know this might be hard to hear, but I think it's time you knew the truth. Tom and we've had our own struggles. Things haven't been what they seemed on the surface. And I think, for the sake of everyone involved, you need to hear it directly from me. I felt my pulse quicken. The unspoken truth she was about to reveal hung in the air, thick and suffocating. What was she about to say? Anna, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. The truth is, there's been more to Tom and me than you know. And it's time that I came clean about everything. I froze. The weight of her words hung in the air like an unspeakable truth, one I was not ready to hear. And yet, I knew in that moment that everything I thought I knew was about to be turned upside down. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? I could feel my breath catch in my throat as Betty's words sank in. My mind raced, trying to process what she had just said. Tom and Betty? What did she mean by there's more to Tom and me than you know? Was there something I had missed all along? Something hidden beneath the surface, something that had been lurking in the shadows all this time? Betty's gaze was steady, but there was a vulnerability in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. It almost felt like she was waiting for me to react, bracing herself for the storm of emotions that might follow. But I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me, not yet. Not when I didn't even know what she was talking about. Betty, I said, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible, what are you saying? What do you mean there's more to Tom and you? She sighed, her eyes flickering with something like regret, before looking down at the table. I've kept this secret from you for so long, Anna. And I'm not proud of it, but I think it's time you knew. My hands were clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms as I braced myself for whatever was coming next. For years, I've been trying to control everything, to make everything look perfect, Betty continued, her voice trembling slightly. But that's not the whole story. Tom and we've been through more than you realize. We've had our own struggles. And some of them, well, they've involved things I'm not proud of. But I need you to understand something. There's a reason for the way I've acted. I felt my stomach twist. A reason for what, Betty? What are you trying to say? Betty's gaze flickered with discomfort, and I could tell she was struggling to find the right words. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter now. The reason I've always tried to control you, to put myself in the middle of everything, is because I've always been scared. Scared of losing Tom. Scared of losing the one person who's always been there for me. Even when I pushed him away, even when I hurt him, he never truly left. And I've spent so much time pushing you both away, trying to control what I couldn't control, that I've hurt everyone in the process. I was still processing her words, still trying to make sense of what she was saying. Was she talking about a secret relationship with Tom? A past they had shared that I hadn't known about? What did all this mean? Betty, you're not making sense, I said, my voice shaky. You're saying you've tried to control everything, but what does that have to do with me and Tom? What's this about you and him? Betty's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, I saw something genuine in her, the raw emotion of someone who had been holding back for far too long. I've been scared of losing him for so long, Anna. And I've been trying to protect him in my own way. But I haven't been protecting him. I've been hurting him. And I've been hurting you too. I stared at her, unable to find the words to respond. Everything she was saying felt like a jumbled mess, a tangled web of emotions and unspoken truths. I had no idea where it was leading, but I knew that it was something I needed to understand, whether I was ready for it or not. Betty, I said, finally finding my voice again. What are you telling me? Are you saying that you've been involved with Tom in some way? That there's been something between you two that I don't know about? She shook her head quickly, her face flushed with embarrassment. No, it's not like that, Anna. It's not what you're thinking. Tom and our relationship has never been like that. But I've crossed lines in other ways. I've manipulated situations, tried to get between you two. I've done things to keep control over him, to keep him close, but never in the way you're imagining. I've made it seem like I had some kind of hold on him, and that's been my mistake. I blinked, trying to process this new information. So, you've been manipulating us? Trying to control Tom, trying to control me, without us knowing. Betty looked away, her voice breaking. Yes, I know it's hard to hear. I've been so obsessed with keeping things the way I wanted them, with having Tom all to myself, that I didn't see how much I was pushing him away. And worse, I didn't see how much I was hurting you. The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like everything had been a lie. Every time she played the role of the loving mother-in-law, every moment she feigned concern or tried to insert herself into our lives, had been part of this twisted game she was playing. And I had fallen for it, again and again. I don't know if I can believe you, Betty, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. How do I know you're being honest now? How do I know this isn't just another manipulation? Betty's eyes filled with tears as she met my gaze. Because I'm not trying to manipulate you anymore, Anna. I'm telling you the truth, all of it. I've made so many mistakes, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I know I've lost your trust. But I'm here now because I want to change. I want to fix things for both you and Tom. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal, but underneath it all, there was something else, a flicker of hope. Could she really be telling the truth? Could she really change? I need time to process all of this, I said, my hands shaking. I don't know what you expect from me, Betty. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Betty nodded, wiping her tears away. I understand. I don't expect anything from you right now. I just needed to tell you the truth, no matter how painful it is. And I hope someday you'll be able to see that I'm trying to do better. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the weight of the conversation. There was so much to unpack, so much I didn't understand. But one thing was clear: Betty's manipulation had gone deeper than I had ever realized, and it had affected both Tom and me in ways I couldn't even fathom. As we sat in silence, I realized that this conversation, this truth, was just the beginning of a much longer journey. I didn't know where it would lead or if Betty and I could ever rebuild anything, but I knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. The following days were a blur of emotions. Betty's revelation had rocked me to my core, leaving me suspended between anger, disbelief, and a strange, nagging sense of empathy. It was almost as if I were caught in a storm, unable to escape the overwhelming sense of betrayal, but at the same time, the slightest glimmer of hope flickered in the distance. Was it possible for her to truly change? Could I ever trust her again after everything she had done? Tom had been quiet ever since the conversation at the cafe. I could tell he was processing everything in his own way, and I knew he had his own questions for his mother, though he hadn't voiced them yet. I wasn't sure if he even knew how to handle the fact that his mother had been manipulating him, controlling situations without his awareness. How could he have known? After all, Betty had always been so subtle, so skilled at weaving her web of influence that it was easy for anyone, including Tom, to be caught in it without realizing. I found myself replaying every interaction with Betty in my mind. The way she'd always seemed to push me aside, the subtle digs at my relationship with Tom, the way she had tried to insert herself into every aspect of our lives. It all suddenly made sense. But what didn't make sense was how someone who claimed to love her son could be so cold and calculating, so willing to manipulate everything around her just to maintain control. That night, after dinner, Tom and I sat together on the couch. He had been quiet for most of the evening, lost in his own thoughts, and I had been doing my best to give him space. But now, as the weight of the day pressed down on us, I knew it was time to talk. "Tom," I began, my voice soft but firm, "we need to talk about what Betty said. About everything." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know. I've been trying to figure out what to say. I don't even know where to start." I turned to face him, my eyes searching his face for any hint of what he was thinking. I don't understand, Tom. How did we get here? How could she have done all of that without you knowing?" Tom's face tightened, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. "I don't know, Anna. I really don't. I feel like I've been blind to so much of what's been going on. But now that I think about it, I can see how she's done it, how she's manipulated me, how she's manipulated you, how she's put herself in the middle of everything and made us feel like we needed her. I just didn't see it until now." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It was clear that he was struggling too, but in a different way. He had spent so many years with his mother, believing that their relationship was solid, that he had been in control. But now, that illusion was shattered. The trust between him and Betty had been tainted, and the repercussions were echoing through every corner of our lives. "Do you think she can change, Tom?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom looked at me, his expression pained. "I don't know. I want to believe that she can. But I don't know how much damage has already been done, and I don't know if I can ever see her the same way again. It's hard to unsee what we've just learned." I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I don't know if I can ever trust her again, Tom. She's hurt us both, in ways I never imagined. And I don't even know if I want her in our lives right now." "I know," he said quietly, his thumb gently brushing over my hand. "I don't want you to feel like you have to keep pretending everything's okay. I'm just as lost as you are, Anna. I don't know what to do or what the right thing is." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of everything pressing down on us. I wanted to believe that we could fix everything, that somehow we could rebuild the trust that had been broken. But deep down, I knew it would take time, more time than I was ready to give. I didn't want to rush into anything, especially not with someone who had hurt me so deeply. The next day, Betty called again, but this time, I wasn't sure I was ready to pick up. I had to take a step back and figure out what I wanted from this situation. Was I prepared to forgive her? Could I even begin to understand her motivations? Or was it better to cut ties and move on? "I'll talk to her," Tom said, after I told him about the call. "I think it's time we confront her about everything. I need to know the truth, all of it." I nodded, grateful that he was taking the initiative. He had been quiet for so long, but now he was stepping up. He needed answers just as much as I did, and it seemed like he was finally ready to demand them. That afternoon, Tom and I sat in our living room, waiting for Betty to arrive. My stomach churned with nervous energy. I couldn't decide if I was ready for the confrontation that was about to happen or if I should just let it go and move forward. But there was no avoiding it. We had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. When Betty walked through the door, I couldn't help but notice how much she had changed in just a few days. Her usual confidence had been replaced by a palpable anxiety. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying, and her movements were stiff, like she was walking on eggshells. She clearly knew that the conversation she was about to have wouldn't be easy. "Tom," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "Anna, I know this is hard for both of you. I didn't expect things to go this way. I never meant for any of this to happen." Tom stood up, his face hardening. "Then why did you let it happen, Mom? Why did you manipulate us like this? Why did you try to control everything?" Betty flinched at his words, but she didn't back down. "I never meant to hurt you, Tom. I didn't know how to let go. I thought if I could just keep things the way they were, I could protect you from everything else. I was scared. I was scared of losing you, scared of losing my place in your life." I could feel the heat rise in my chest. "But Tom isn't your property, Betty. He's a grown man. He has his own life now. And what you did wasn't protecting him, it was suffocating him." Betty's face crumpled as she looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I know," she whispered. "I know. And I'm sorry, Anna. I am. But I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can." Tom shook his head, his voice low. "It's going to take time, Mom. A lot of time. I can't just forgive you right away. I need space to process all of this. And so does Anna." Betty nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I understand. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I hope someday you'll be able to see that I'm trying to change. I'm trying to be a better person." I looked at Tom, my heart torn. I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive Betty, but seeing the raw emotion in her face, the vulnerability, made me wonder if there was hope for her to change. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new, a chance for all of us to start over. But for now, all I could do was wait. And hope. The days after our conversation with Betty were unsettling. Things felt different now, as if we were walking through a fog of uncertainty. Betty had left that day, her tears and apology hanging in the air like a fragile thread. I wasn't sure if I could believe her, whether her remorse was genuine or just another manipulation to regain control. But something in me, despite the hurt, told me I had to at least try to understand her, to allow myself to see if she could change. Tom and I had talked long into the night, trying to process everything. The betrayal felt raw, but we both knew that we couldn't continue on the same path we had been on before. Things had to change. But how? How could we rebuild the trust that had been shattered? How could I ever feel safe in our own home again when it seemed like Betty had been pulling strings in the background all along? The question lingered in my mind, like a heavy weight I couldn't shake off. It had been a week since the confrontation with Betty. I had kept my distance, trying to focus on my work and my own peace of mind, but the tension in our house was impossible to ignore. Tom was quieter than usual, and whenever Betty's name came up, he would grow visibly tense. I knew he was struggling with the idea of confronting his own mother, of dealing with the emotions that had been bubbling up for years. It was hard for him to reconcile the mother he had known with the woman we had just uncovered. I sat in the living room, flipping through a book, but my mind kept drifting. I thought about everything that had happened, about all the memories that now felt tainted. All those times I had second-guessed my instincts, the moments when I had felt something was off but couldn't put my finger on it. Betty had been in the background of it all, subtly guiding the course of our lives, manipulating our choices without us even knowing. I couldn't keep pretending it hadn't affected me. But Tom, he was still my husband. I couldn't let Betty's actions come between us. Just then, Tom walked in, his face drawn with exhaustion. He sat down beside me, and I could feel the weight of the silence between us. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? The words felt inadequate in the face of everything we were going through. I called Betty today, Tom said after a moment, his voice low. My stomach dropped. What did she say? Tom ran his hand over his face. She said she wanted to see us, talk things through more. She said she's willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me wanted to tell him to cut her out of our lives completely. But then I remembered the woman who had raised him, the woman who had been there for him when no one else was. Was I being too harsh? Was I closing off the possibility of reconciliation too quickly? I leaned back against the couch and exhaled deeply. Do you think she can change, Tom? I mean, really change. He met my gaze, his eyes dark with uncertainty. I don't know, Anna. I want to believe that she can. I want to believe that she's not the woman I thought she was. But I'm scared. I don't know if I can ever look at her the same way again. I understood that fear all too well. The fear of being disappointed again. The fear of letting someone back into your life only for them to hurt you again. I had lived with that fear too. But I had also learned that holding on to resentment, holding on to that pain, could destroy me from the inside out. I just don't know if I'm ready, I whispered. I'm scared too. Scared of being manipulated again. Scared that I'll let her in, and she'll just hurt me again. Tom nodded, his expression softening. I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. It's going to take time. And I'm willing to give it that time. I looked at him, trying to read the depth of his emotions. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was torn between the woman who had raised him and the woman who had hurt both of us. It was impossible to know what the right choice was. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let this tear us apart. Do you want to meet with her? I asked carefully, my voice shaky. Tom hesitated for a long moment before answering. I think we need to. Not for her, but for us. So that we can finally have closure. I need to know where I stand with her, and I need to know if we can move forward, even if it's slowly. I nodded, understanding his need for closure. For both of us, this wasn't just about Betty. It was about our relationship. Our trust. Could we heal from the wounds she had inflicted on us? Or was this the end of a chapter we couldn't close? That evening we made the decision. Tom would meet Betty alone first, and then I would join them. We didn't know what to expect. Would Betty continue her apology, or would she retreat into her old ways of manipulation? I couldn't predict it, but I was ready to face whatever came. Tom left for Betty's house, and I spent the next hour pacing, my mind running 1,000,000 miles per second. Part of me wanted to avoid the meeting altogether. It was too much. Too painful. But then I reminded myself. If we were going to move forward, if we were going to try and rebuild our relationship, we had to face the truth. All of it. When Tom finally returned, his face was unreadable. I stood up, waiting for him to speak. Well? I asked, my voice tight. Tom ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. She's still insisting that she wants to make things right, Anna. She says she doesn't want to lose us. But I don't know if I can believe her anymore. I don't know if I can go back to pretending everything's fine when I feel like there's this huge wall between us. I could feel the knot tighten in my chest. Did she say anything else? Anything that might make you feel differently? Tom shook his head. No. Just that she's sorry. That she wants to fix things. But I don't know if I can trust that. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with emotion. I'm scared too, Tom. I'm scared of what letting her back into our lives might do to us. I'm scared of her turning everything upside down again. He stepped closer to me, taking my hands in his. I know. I'm scared too. But we can't live in fear forever. We need to decide if we're willing to give her another chance. Or if we're going to walk away for good. And there it was. The decision we both needed to make. It wasn't just about Betty. It was about us. Our marriage. Our future. Would we allow the past to define us, or would we find a way to heal? I squeezed his hands, my heart pounding in my chest. I'm willing to try, Tom. But only if we're both in this together. I don't want to do this alone. Tom smiled, a small, fragile smile as he pulled me into his arms. We're in this together. Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out. And for the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe it. That maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward. The decision had been made. We would meet Betty together, face to face, and try to move past the tangled mess of secrets, betrayal, and manipulation that had plagued us for so long. But even as we made that decision, I couldn't help but wonder if we were doing the right thing. Could a conversation truly fix the damage that had been done? Or were we just prolonging the inevitable, letting the wound fester until it could no longer be healed? That evening, after dinner, we drove to Betty's house in silence. Tom kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the wheel tightly, his mind clearly occupied with thoughts of what was to come. I sat in the passenger seat, my heart heavy, my mind racing with a mix of anxiety and determination. I wanted to be strong, to be there for Tom, but I also couldn't deny the weight of the uncertainty that loomed over me. When we arrived at Betty's house, Tom parked the car and turned off the engine. We both sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. It seemed like the longest moment of my life. Are you ready for this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tom exhaled sharply, his gaze still fixed on the door. I don't know if I'll ever be ready, Anna. But I can't keep avoiding this. We need closure. We need to know if there's any chance of moving forward, or if we need to walk away for good. I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. Okay, let's do this. We walked to the door together, the weight of the situation heavy on my shoulders. Tom knocked, and we waited. After a moment, the door opened, and there stood Betty, her face drawn and tired. She looked older somehow, more vulnerable than I had ever seen her before. Tom. Anna, she said, her voice trembling. I'm glad you came. We stepped inside, and Betty led us to the living room, where she motioned for us to sit. I could feel the tension in the room, thick and uncomfortable, as we took our seats. I couldn't help but notice the way Betty kept glancing between us, as if unsure of how to proceed. She had been the one to call for this meeting, but now that we were here, it seemed as though she didn't know what to say. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Betty began, her voice soft, about everything I've done, about how I've treated both of you. And I want to start by saying that I am so sorry. I never meant to hurt you, Tom. And Anna, I know I've hurt you too. I can never undo the things I've done, but I'm asking for a chance to make it right. Tom and I exchanged a glance. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she could change, but part of him was still so hurt, so unsure. And I understood. I felt the same way. Betty, I said, my voice steady, I want to believe you. But everything you've done, everything that's come to light, it's hard to just forget it. It's hard to just move on like nothing happened. You've manipulated us, controlled our lives without us even knowing. And that's not something I can easily forgive. Betty's eyes filled with tears. I know. And I'm not asking you to forget. I'm not asking for your forgiveness right now. I want to be better. For you, Tom. For Anna. I know I've made mistakes and I've hurt you both. But I don't want to lose you. I can't lose you. Tom remained silent for a long time, his face hard, as he processed her words. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but firm. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Mom. You've lied to me. You've used me. And that's not something I can just get over. I'm not saying I'll never forgive you. But I need time. I need time to process everything. I need to figure out what kind of relationship we can have from here on out. Betty nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I understand, Tom. I really do. And I'm willing to give you the time you need. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to prove to you that I can change. I could see the pain in her eyes. And for a moment, I almost believed her. But I knew that words were easy, that change took more than just an apology. It took action. It took time. And I wasn't sure I was ready to give Betty that chance, at least not yet. I think we all need time, Betty, I said quietly. We need time to heal. We need time to figure out what we want from this. I can't just jump back into a relationship with you. Not after everything that's happened. But maybe we can start slowly. One step at a time. Betty nodded, her shoulders slumping in relief. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Just, please don't shut me out. I don't want to lose you both. Tom stood up, and I followed his lead. We're not shutting you out, Mom. But we're not going to pretend like everything's fine, either. We need space. We need time to figure this out. And we need to make sure that we're doing this for the right reasons. Betty looked up at him, her face full of hope. I understand. And I'll respect that. Just, please know that I'm doing my best to change. I don't want to hurt you anymore. With that, we left her house, and the silence between us was heavy once again. But this time, there was a small sense of resolution. We had confronted the past, and now it was up to us to decide what the future would look like. As we drove home, I glanced over at Tom. He looked exhausted, his mind clearly still processing the conversation we had just had. I reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. We'll get through this, Tom, I said softly. We'll figure it out. Together. Tom turned to look at me, his eyes softening. I hope so, Anna. I really hope so. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could. The following days were quiet, almost eerily so. The conversation with Betty had left us both with a sense of unresolved tension. We hadn't found a definitive answer, and no promises had been made. We were, for lack of a better word, stuck between the past that had shaped us and the future that was uncertain. Every moment felt like a delicate balancing act, as if at any moment the ground could give way beneath us. Tom had taken some time off work to clear his head, and I had done the same. It seemed like the right time to focus on our relationship, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But how could we rebuild trust when we still had one foot in the past, lingering on all that Betty had done? It felt impossible to move forward when the specter of her actions loomed over us. That afternoon, Tom and I sat in the kitchen, the sunlight filtering through the windows, casting a warm glow across the room. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken words. Tom was absent-mindedly stirring his coffee, his eyes distant, as though he was in another place entirely. Do you think we can really forgive her, Anna? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hit me harder than I expected. I had been avoiding thinking about it too much, afraid that I wouldn't have the answers he needed. Forgiveness. It sounded simple, but it was anything but. It wasn't just about saying the words, it was about believing them. Could I really forgive Betty? Could I look past the manipulation, the lies, the years of silent tension, and forgive her? I don't know, I said softly, looking down at my hands. I want to. I really do. But I don't know how. I don't know if I can just forget everything that happened and start over. It's not that simple, Tom. He nodded slowly, his face etched with the same uncertainty I felt. No, it's not simple. It's never going to be simple. But we have to ask ourselves, can we keep living in this limbo, stuck in the past, forever? Or do we move forward, even if it's painful? I took a deep breath, letting his words settle inside me. He was right. We couldn't keep living in this state of tension and uncertainty. But it wasn't just about moving forward. It was about learning to trust again. It was about choosing to let go of the anger, the betrayal, and finding a way to rebuild what had been broken. But could we truly do that? Maybe we need to start small, I said finally, looking up at him. Maybe we need to stop expecting everything to be perfect right away. Maybe we take it one step at a time. Maybe we focus on ourselves first. And then we see where it goes from there. Tom studied me for a moment, as though he was trying to gauge my sincerity. One step at a time, he repeated. I can do that. But I need to know that you're not going to shut me out, Anna. I need to know that you're still here with me, even through all of this. I'm here, Tom, I said, my voice firm. I'm not going anywhere. But I need you to understand that this is hard for me, too. It's hard to forgive someone who's hurt you so much. I don't want to be bitter. I don't want to hold on to the anger, but it's not easy. He reached across the table and took my hand, his touch gentle. I know, Anna. I know. And I'm not asking you to forgive her today. Or even tomorrow. I just need you to be honest with me. I need to know what you're feeling so we can get through this together. I squeezed his hand, grateful for his patience, his willingness to wait for me. I promise I will be honest, Tom. I don't want to hide anything from you. I just need time. He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. That's all I'm asking for. The days that followed were a delicate dance of patience and introspection. Tom and I spent time together, focusing on each other, trying to find some semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos of everything we had been through. We went on walks, cooked meals together, and talked about the future, our future, without the shadow of Betty hanging over us. But the conversation with Betty was never far from my mind. I kept wondering if we were doing the right thing. Should we try to include her in our lives again? Should we give her the benefit of the doubt, or should we protect ourselves from further harm? One evening, as I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up to see a message from Betty. Anna, I know you've been trying to find some peace. I just want to let you know that I've been thinking about everything, and I know I've made a mess of things. I don't expect you to forgive me right now, but I hope you'll consider it eventually. Please don't shut me out completely. I'm still your mother, and I love you. I stared at the message for a moment, the words sinking in. Betty's message was full of regret, but there was still an underlying tone of desperation. She wasn't giving up, not yet. But I wasn't sure if that was a good thing. Was it sincere, or was it just another manipulation? I couldn't decide. I showed Tom the message, and he seemed to read it with the same wariness I felt. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of concern and caution. What do you think? I don't know, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I want to believe her. I want to believe that she's changed. But I don't know if I can trust her yet. Tom nodded, his brow furrowing in thought. I think it's going to take time, Anna. A lot of time. But I also think we need to decide if we're willing to make the effort to get there. It's not going to be easy, but it might be worth it. I bit my lip, torn between the desire to forgive and the fear of being hurt again. I don't want to close the door on her, Tom. I don't want to shut her out completely. But I also don't want to let her back in just because she says the right things. I need to know that she's sincere. Tom squeezed my hand, his voice gentle. We'll figure it out, Anna. Together. And no matter what, I'm here for you. We don't have to have all the answers right now. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we didn't need all the answers. Maybe we just needed to take things one day at a time and trust that, in the end, we would find our way. I'm here for you too, Tom, I whispered. And I'll keep trying, even if it's hard. And that was enough for now. The days after Betty's message were a whirlwind of emotions. Tom and I tried our best to focus on healing, but the tension of the past still lingered in every conversation, every quiet moment. We were like two people standing on opposite sides of a great divide, unsure of how to bridge the gap, yet determined to try. Tom had been distant at times, retreating into his work or his thoughts, and I knew he was struggling with what we'd talked about in that moment of clarity. He wanted so badly to forgive his mother, to heal the wounds she had inflicted, but he also knew that he had to guard his heart. We both did. It was hard not to wonder what our future would look like. Would we ever be able to truly move past all the hurt? Could we ever have the kind of relationship I dreamed of before all of this happened? It felt like we were both standing still, waiting for something to change, but unsure of how or when that would happen. One evening, Tom suggested we take a weekend trip, a quick getaway to clear our heads and reconnect. It was his idea to visit a small cabin in the mountains, far from everything. I agreed, knowing we both needed it. Time away from the chaos, away from the lingering questions and unresolved emotions, could give us the space to breathe. We packed our bags and made the drive through winding roads, the scenery changing with every mile. The higher we went, the quieter the world seemed to become. As we reached the cabin, a sense of calm washed over me. The air was crisp and fresh, the sound of the wind through the trees almost soothing. I could feel the weight of everything that had happened slipping away, if only for a moment. The cabin was simple, a little rustic, but cozy. It had a large stone fireplace, big windows that looked out onto the mountains, and a porch swing that swayed gently in the breeze. As we unpacked, I felt a tiny spark of hope begin to grow inside me. Maybe, just maybe, this was the space we needed to find our way forward. We spent the evening by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. There was no pressure, no expectations, just the two of us together. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the weight of Betty's actions on my shoulders. It was just us, reconnecting in a way I hadn't thought possible. As the fire crackled in the background, Tom turned to me, his face serious, but softened by the gentle light. "Anna," he said quietly, his hand reaching out to take mine, "I know we've been through a lot. And I know you're still struggling with everything that happened with my mom. But I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm here with you. I'm committed to making this work, no matter how hard it gets." I squeezed his hand, my heart swelling with love and gratitude. "I know, Tom. And I'm here with you too. I'm not going anywhere, either. I think I just need time. I need to process everything that's happened and figure out what I want. I don't want to rush into anything. I want to be sure, for both of us." He nodded, his gaze softening. "Take all the time you need, Anna. I just want you to know that whatever you decide, I'll be right here." For the first time in a long while, I felt like we were on the same page. There was no rush, no pressure, just the understanding that we were in this together, no matter what. I knew we still had a long road ahead of us, but for the first time, I felt hopeful about the future. The next day, we woke early to take a hike through the woods. The air was cool and crisp, and the forest seemed to wrap us in its quiet embrace. We walked for hours, the silence between us comfortable, the only sounds being the crunch of leaves beneath our feet and the distant call of birds. It felt like we were the only two people in the world, lost in the beauty of nature and each other's company. At one point, we found a small clearing, a perfect spot to rest. Tom sat down on a fallen log, and I joined him, leaning against his shoulder. We sat there in silence for a long while, taking in the beauty around us. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," Tom said finally, his voice low. "About my mom, about forgiveness, about whether it's possible to move forward. I know it's not going to be easy, and I know it's going to take time. But I'm starting to think that maybe we can find a way to do it, not just for her, but for us. For our future." I turned to look at him, my heart aching with the weight of his words. "I want that too, Tom. I want to move forward. But I need to know that we're doing this for the right reasons. Not because it's what's expected, not because we feel guilty, but because we truly want to build something stronger than what we've had before." He nodded, his hand reaching for mine. "I want that too, Anna. I want us to have something real, something lasting. But I also know that it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to take patience. But I'm willing to give it everything I've got." I smiled softly, squeezing his hand in return. "Me too, Tom. I'm willing to give it everything I've got. We sat in silence for a while longer, watching the clouds drift across the sky. It was the kind of moment that felt timeless, like everything we'd been through had led us here, to this quiet space where we could finally breathe. That night, back at the cabin, we sat on the porch swing, the night air cool against our skin. The stars stretched out above us in a glittering expanse, the only light coming from the moon and the distant glow of the fireflies. Tom wrapped his arm around me, pulling me close, and I rested my head on his shoulder. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the weight of the past. It was as though, in this quiet place, everything that had been broken could finally start to heal. I think we're going to be okay, I whispered, my voice filled with a quiet certainty. Tom kissed the top of my head. I think so too. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe it. The days passed slowly, but the calm of the cabin seemed to work wonders on both of us. We spent our mornings exploring the woods, and our evenings curled up by the fire, not talking much, but simply existing in the same space. There was a quiet comfort in it, a rhythm that we had long since forgotten. But even in this serenity, the reality of our situation loomed, hanging silently in the background, like the shadow of a storm cloud that had yet to break. Tom was doing his best to respect the space I needed, but I could see the quiet concern in his eyes. He wanted to move forward, to leave the past behind us and start fresh. And I wanted that too. But deep down, I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go. How could I? There was so much hurt, so much confusion in my heart, that I wasn't sure if it would ever truly heal. I spent the better part of the evening wrestling with my thoughts. My phone lay on the small wooden table beside me, a constant reminder of the world we had left behind. The ping of a message shattered the quiet, and I instinctively reached for it. It was from Betty. Anna, I don't know if you're ready to talk, but I just want you to know I'm here. Whenever you're ready. I'm not giving up on us. My heart sank as I read her words. There it was again, that pull of the call to return to the chaos, to the confusion that I'd been trying so hard to escape. I couldn't deny it. I was tempted. I wanted to reach out, to hear her side, to understand what was going through her mind. But at the same time, a deep sense of dread washed over me. Was I ready to open that door again? I turned the phone over, slipping it back onto the table. I didn't want to think about it right now. I didn't want to make any decisions, not while we were here, away from it all. Tom noticed my distraction, the way my eyes had narrowed as I stared at the table. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the turmoil inside. "It's just Betty." She texted me again. Tom's face tightened for a moment, his jaw clenching. He didn't say anything at first, but I could see the tension in his posture. "What did she say?" I sighed, rubbing my forehead. "She wants to talk. She says she's not giving up on us." "Anna," he trailed off, clearly wrestling with his own feelings. "I don't know if you're ready for that." "I don't know if I'm ready for that." I bit my lip, my thoughts swirling. "I don't know if I am either, Tom. But she's my mother. I can't just ignore her forever, can I?" Tom took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. "I get it. I do. But you also have to think about what's best for you. What's best for us. We can't keep letting her dictate how we feel, Anna. We've worked so hard to get here, to get to this point. I don't want to go back to the way things were." I nodded, my heart heavy. "I don't either. But it's hard, Tom. It's hard to just walk away from her, even after everything." There was a long pause, and for a moment, we just sat there in the quiet of the cabin, the crackling of the fire filling the empty space between us. Finally, Tom spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Maybe we don't have to make any decisions right now. Maybe we just take it one day at a time. We don't have to rush into anything, and we don't have to let her control us. We've come too far to let her pull us back into the past." I looked up at him, the warmth of the fire reflected in his eyes. "You're right. We don't have to make any decisions right now. We have time. I need to figure out what's best for me for us. I can't keep living in the shadow of everything that's happened. Tom nodded, his expression filled with understanding. And whatever you decide, Anna, I'll be right here. We're in this together. That was all I needed to hear. With that simple reassurance, I felt a weight lift off my chest. Maybe, just maybe, we could handle whatever came next. We didn't need to have all the answers right now. What mattered was that we were facing it together. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet moments, long walks, and deep conversations. Tom and I had reached an unspoken agreement. We would not let Betty's presence dominate our lives. Instead, we focused on each other, on our relationship, and on healing the wounds that had opened up between us. One afternoon, after a particularly long hike, we returned to the cabin, both exhausted but happy. We collapsed onto the couch, our legs tangled together as we lay side by side. "This is nice," I said, my voice soft. "It's good to be away from everything." Tom's fingers traced small patterns on my arm, the simple touch grounding me. "It is. I've missed this. Just us, no distractions." I turned to face him, my heart swelling with affection. "I'm glad we came here. I needed this time to think." "Good," he said, leaning in to kiss my forehead. "And I'm glad you're taking the time you need. You don't have to rush through this, Anna. You don't have to figure everything out overnight." I smiled, feeling the tension inside me ease. "I'm trying not to. I think, for once, I'm okay with not having all the answers." He chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "It's kind of nice, isn't it? Not having to figure everything out right away." I nodded, snuggling closer to him. "Yeah, it feels like we're exactly where we're supposed to be. And for now, that's enough." For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. There was no pressure, no looming crisis to deal with. It was just us together, taking things one step at a time. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The serenity of the cabin had worked its magic. We were in a rhythm now, a gentle flow of shared moments, deep conversations, and quiet afternoons. The air seemed clearer, the weight of our past struggles a little lighter with each passing day. But even in the calm, there were moments of hesitation, of uncertainty about what lay ahead. Tom and I had come so far in our healing, but there were still unspoken truths between us, truths that neither of us was ready to face head-on. We had decided, for now, not to talk about the future. It was a topic we were avoiding, the proverbial elephant in the room. Could we really make this work long-term? What would it look like when we went back home and faced the real world? Would things go back to how they were before, or would we find a new way forward? It wasn't a question of love. We both knew we loved each other. But sometimes love wasn't enough. Sometimes it took more than just affection to hold things together. It took compromise, understanding, and sometimes a willingness to face things you weren't ready to face. That afternoon, as we sat outside on the porch swing, watching the sun dip lower in the sky, the conversation turned toward Betty again. I had been putting it off, avoiding it as best as I could. But it had been too long since I had heard from her, and the silence was becoming unbearable. "You've been awfully quiet about your mom," Tom said, his voice a mix of curiosity and caution. "Is everything okay? I know you're not ready to talk to her, but is there anything you want to say about it?" I sighed, feeling the weight of the question sink in. There was so much to unpack, so much I wasn't sure how to explain. "I don't know, Tom. I don't know what I want. I don't know what's the right thing to do." Tom nodded, his gaze steady on me. "It's okay to feel uncertain. This isn't something you can fix overnight, and you don't have to have all the answers. But I think you're right to take your time. You can't rush through this." I looked down at my hands, suddenly aware of the phone that had been resting on the table by the door. The very device that had brought Betty's voice into my life again. It's not even about rushing, though. It's just she has a way of making me feel like I should be doing more, like I should be forgiving her and moving forward. But it's not that simple, is it? "No," Tom agreed softly. "It's never that simple. And I think you know that. I know she's your mom, but you don't have to carry her burden on your shoulders. You have the right to protect your peace. I took a deep breath. I know. But what if I'm just being selfish? What if I'm just avoiding it because it's easier? Anna, Tom said firmly, his voice warm but strong, you're not being selfish. You're being human. You've been through a lot, and you're entitled to protect yourself from more hurt, especially when you don't know what kind of response you'll get. If she really wants to make amends, she'll have to prove it to you. Not the other way around. His words hit me harder than I expected. They made sense, but they also cut to the core of something I hadn't fully admitted to myself, my fear of being the one who let go, who moved on. If I stopped holding on to the hope that things could be fixed with Betty, what would that mean for me? Would I feel guilty? Would I feel like I was abandoning her? I turned to Tom, needing to feel the comfort of his presence. I just don't know if I can forgive her, Tom. I don't know if I can get past everything she's done. Tom squeezed my hand gently, offering me a look of quiet support. You don't have to forgive her right away. You don't even have to forgive her at all. That's your choice. What matters is that you're choosing what's best for you, for us. And if you choose to have a relationship with her, it has to be on your terms, not hers. I let his words sink in, the weight of them slowly lifting the tension that had been building inside me for days. He was right. I wasn't obligated to forgive Betty, at least not in the way I thought I was. The decision was mine, and it wasn't one that had to be rushed. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the thoughts of Betty lingered in my mind. The decision hadn't become any easier, but at least I had some clarity. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over the situation, like I could take the time I needed without feeling guilty for doing so. The next morning, after a quiet breakfast in the kitchen, Tom surprised me with an idea. He had been thinking a lot about our future, about how we could make this time away work for us, and he had a proposal. What do you think about staying a few more days? He asked, his eyes glinting with a mischievous spark. I mean, we've still got time, and the weather's perfect. Why go back so soon? I laughed, surprised at his suggestion. You want to stay here longer? What about work? Your job. I can manage, he said with a grin. Besides, we deserve this. We deserve some time to just be us. No distractions, no pressure. I paused, considering his offer. It was tempting. Part of me didn't want to leave the peace and quiet we'd found here. But I also knew that sooner or later, we'd have to go back to the real world. I don't know, I said, pretending to deliberate. What would we do with all this extra time? Tom chuckled. I don't know. Just enjoy it, I guess. But I don't want to rush things, Anna. I just think it might be nice to spend a little more time here without worrying about what's waiting for us when we get home. His suggestion was simple, but it felt profound in that moment. Maybe we didn't have to solve everything right now. Maybe we didn't have to go back immediately and face the world as it was. Maybe we could extend this time, give ourselves more space to think, to breathe, to heal. You know what? I said, smiling. I think I'd like that. Tom's grin widened. Good. Then it's settled. For the first time in a while, I felt hopeful. We didn't have all the answers, but maybe that was okay. Maybe we didn't need to know exactly what the future would look like. As long as we were together, facing whatever came our way, I was ready to take the next step. And for now, that was enough. The days blurred together in the gentle pace of our retreat. The cabin, surrounded by the quiet wilderness, became a sanctuary where I could lose myself in thoughts I had buried for far too long. But no matter how much I tried to push it all aside, the call from the past remained. Betty's messages, the unresolved anger, the wounds that I had hoped time would heal, they were still there, quietly waiting for me to face them. Tom had been my rock. He knew when to give me space and when to offer a comforting presence. But even he could sense that the unresolved issues with my mother were beginning to weigh on me again. One morning, after a quiet breakfast, Tom and I sat on the porch, each lost in our own thoughts, as we watched the sun climb higher in the sky. I had a heavy weight on my chest, the kind that had been slowly creeping up on me. I could feel it bubbling to the surface, and it was becoming harder to ignore. Tom turned to me, his brow furrowed. "You've been quiet the past few days. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, unsure of how to put my feelings into words. I've been thinking about Betty a lot," I said softly. "And I'm starting to feel like I can't keep running from her forever." Tom's expression softened, and he reached over to take my hand. "You don't have to run from her, Anna. But you don't have to rush into anything, either. You're allowed to take your time." I nodded, grateful for his understanding, but the conflict within me was undeniable. Part of me wanted to reach out to my mother, to give her another chance, but another part of me feared what would happen if I did. Would it all be the same? Would she hurt me again? "I just don't know where to start," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "Every time I think about talking to her, I get scared. Scared of what she'll say. Scared of how I'll react. I don't even know if I can forgive her, Tom." Tom squeezed my hand gently. "Forgiveness doesn't have to mean forgetting, Anna. It doesn't mean you have to accept everything she's done. But you have to decide whether or not you're ready to let go of the anger that's been holding you back. That's where you start." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. His words resonated with me, but they also made my stomach churn. The anger, the bitterness, the resentment, they had been a part of me for so long. How could I just let them go? How could I face the woman who had caused me so much pain? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the table next to me. The sound cut through the tension like a knife. It was a message from Betty. I stared at the screen for a moment, frozen in place. The message was simple, just a few words, but it felt like a weight had settled into my chest. "Anna, I've been thinking about you. I miss you. I hope we can talk soon." My heart thudded in my chest, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of emotion. Part of me wanted to delete the message, to pretend it wasn't there. But I knew I couldn't. It wasn't just a message, it was a crossroads. A moment that would determine how I would move forward. I showed Tom the message, my eyes wide. "She wants to talk. She misses me." Tom looked at the phone for a moment, then back at me. "What do you want, Anna?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know. I think I'm ready to talk to her. But I'm scared, Tom. I'm scared of what will happen if I do." He smiled softly, his voice full of reassurance. "Whatever happens, I'll be here. But you're not alone in this. You have to do what feels right for you." For a long moment, I stared at the screen, the words from my mother flickering before me. It felt like a test, a challenge to confront everything I had been avoiding. Could I really let go of the anger? Could I allow myself to hope for something different, something better? Finally, I typed a simple reply, "Okay. Let's talk." The decision was made. I had no idea where it would lead, but I knew it was the right one. It was time to face the past. To face her. That afternoon, as I prepared to make the call, my mind raced with 1,000 questions. Would she apologize? Would she even acknowledge the things she had done? What if she tried to manipulate me again, the way she always had? I couldn't shake the fear that no matter how much time had passed, she would never change. But I had to try. I couldn't live in the shadow of the past forever. I sat down on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, my breath shallow. Tom was sitting nearby, giving me the space I needed. He could tell I was on the verge of something big, and he didn't want to push me. With a trembling hand, I dialed the number, the ringing sound echoing in my ears. Each second felt like an eternity, and the anticipation threatened to swallow me whole. When Betty finally picked up, her voice was soft, hesitant. "Anna?" I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering my thoughts. "Yes, it's me." There was a long pause, and for a moment, I wondered if she would hang up. But then I heard her voice again, this time shaky, almost fragile. "I'm so glad you called. I've been thinking about you a lot. I miss you, Anna. I just want things to be okay between us again." I swallowed hard, my emotions swirling. This was it. The moment I had been avoiding. "I don't know if things can ever go back to how they were, Betty. Too much has happened. Too much has been broken. She sighed, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. I know. I know I've made mistakes, Anna. I've hurt you, and I'm so sorry for that. I can't change what I did, but I can try to be better. If you'll let me. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Was this real? Was she truly sorry, or was this just another manipulation? I don't know if I can forgive you, I said softly, feeling the weight of the words. I don't know if I can ever get past everything. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was filled with emotion. I understand, and I won't push you. But I just wanted you to know that I love you, and I'm here if you ever want to talk. The conversation ended shortly after that, and as I set my phone down, I realized something I hadn't expected. I felt lighter. Not completely healed, but lighter. The weight of the past wasn't gone, but for the first time, it didn't feel so heavy. Tom was waiting for me, his expression calm and patient. How do you feel? I took a deep breath, looking into his eyes. I don't know, but I think I'm ready to take the next step. Whatever that is. He smiled softly, standing up to pull me into a gentle hug. You're stronger than you think. As I rested my head against his shoulder, I realized that, for the first time in a long while, I was no longer afraid of the future. Whatever it held, I was ready to face it. After the conversation with Betty, a sense of relief settled over me, but there was still a gnawing uncertainty. It felt like the first step had been taken, but it was just that, the first step. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but at least I had opened the door. For the first time in years, I could see a crack of light where the darkness had once been all-encompassing. Still, the questions lingered. That evening, Tom and I went for a walk along the lake that bordered the cabin. The sun was setting, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, the air cool and refreshing as we strolled side by side. The quiet hum of nature surrounded us, but my thoughts were elsewhere. They kept circling back to the conversation with Betty, replaying it over and over in my mind. What now? I asked softly, breaking the silence. Tom glanced at me, his expression thoughtful. I think you'll figure it out, Anna, he said quietly. It's going to take time. You don't have to have all the answers right now. I nodded, but still couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. But what if it's too late? What if I've already forgiven her in my heart, but I can't forgive her in the way she needs me to? What if that's not enough for her? Tom squeezed my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. You can't control what she needs or expects, Anna. You can only control what's in your heart. If you're ready to heal, that's what matters. Not her expectations, not anyone else's. I stopped walking, taking in a deep breath of the crisp air. I don't even know what healing looks like. I don't know if it's possible, Tom. What if it's just going to stay this way forever? This unresolved mess between us. What if I'm never going to feel whole again? Tom turned to face me, his eyes locking with mine, unwavering. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. And sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You don't need to know everything right now. You just need to take it one day at a time. I couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed. It was easy to talk about healing in theory, but much harder when you were standing in the middle of the storm, unsure if the clouds would ever part. I had so much I needed to process, so much I hadn't yet figured out. As we continued walking, my thoughts turned inward again. The words Betty had said echoed in my mind. I miss you. She had sounded genuine, but could I trust that? After everything that had happened, how could I be sure that she wasn't just saying what I needed to hear to let her back into my life? Do you really think I'm ready, Tom? I asked, my voice tinged with doubt. Tom stopped and turned to me, his expression soft but firm. I think you're ready to start healing. Maybe not ready to dive into a full-blown relationship with her yet, but you're ready to stop carrying the weight of everything on your own. That's a huge first step. I smiled faintly, grateful for his support. It wasn't easy, but having him by my side made it a little more bearable. As we reached the end of the lake, I realized just how far I had come in these past few weeks. Not in terms of completely resolving everything, but in my willingness to face what I had been avoiding for so long. The next morning, after a peaceful night's sleep, I woke up early and decided to call Betty again. The previous evening, I had been up late thinking about what she had said, and I realized that while I didn't have all the answers, I had more clarity than before. It wasn't about rushing to forgive her, but rather about giving myself permission to take the next step, whatever that might look like. I sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room. I dialed her number, my heart pounding in my chest. It rang for a moment, and then she picked up. "Anna?" Her voice was tentative, but warm. "I'm so glad you called back." "Hi, Betty," I said, my voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside me. "I've been thinking about everything you said. I'm not sure where this is going, but I wanted to talk to you again." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a soft sigh. "I understand, Anna. I just want you to know that I'm here whenever you're ready. I'm not expecting anything from you. I just want a chance to show you that I'm trying." I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of her words settling over me. I didn't know what trying meant in her eyes, but I knew that I couldn't keep waiting for everything to be perfect before I moved forward. It would never be perfect, not with her, not with me, not with anyone. The only thing I could do was move forward the best way I knew how. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you, Betty," I said slowly, "but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to figure out how we can move forward, even if that means it's messy." I could hear the relief in her voice. "Thank you, Anna. That means more than you know. I'll take whatever you're willing to give. I just want to show you that I'm not the same person I was." I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see it. The weight that had been holding me down for so long was starting to lift, just a little. I didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. After I ended the call, I sat in silence for a while, letting the conversation sink in. I didn't have all the answers, but I didn't need to. I had taken another step forward, and that was enough for now. Tom joined me at the table, noticing the contemplative look on my face. "How did it go?" I smiled, a small but genuine smile. "It went well. I think we're both taking things one day at a time. But I'm starting to believe it's possible, Tom, that we can move past the past." Tom's face lit up, and he reached across the table to take my hand. "That's all you can do. One day at a time." And for the first time, I felt like I was on the right path. Not a perfect path, not a guaranteed one, but the right one for me. The future, it seemed, was a lot more hopeful than I had allowed myself to believe. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?